Welcome to Voodoo Whiskey Gaming, and this is my late review of Blood Omen Legacy of Kain. I played on the PS5, it's also available on the PS4, PS3, PS2, and PS1, mostly via backwards compatibility. It did get re-released for the upcoming Soul Reaver remasters. So let's get into the story. You play as Kain. He has traveled to a small village where he is promptly kicked out of their tavern and murdered by thieves. Kain is brought back to life as a vampire to seek vengeance, but he doesn't really just seek vengeance. He winds up embroiled in a much deeper plot involving the Pillars of Nosgoth. Each of these pillars has a guardian who has become corrupted, gone insane, something along those lines, and Kain gets tasked with killing them and restoring the pillars. And I gotta say, one thing that surprised me, because it's been forever and a half since I played this game, is I forgot how quickly, Kain went from, I'm a normal dude, to I'm a vampire. Now I'm a vampire who is, bloodthirsty and just wants to kill. He starts going down that dark vampire path, not conflicted at all, very quickly. And one thing I did appreciate was the scope of the game and the story itself, as well as the fact that they included multiple endings, back on the PlayStation 1 era. This playthrough, though, I went through and gave it the canonical ending because, canonical ending for the upcoming game. But let's move forward onto the audio, and the first thing I'm going to say is, while the music is limited, I do think it's well done and it does fit with the game. I think there are actually a good number of sound effects, and they're as well done as they can be for a PS1 game. But they cover the gambit of the enemies, the weapons, their weapons, your weapons, the different areas, traps, spells, vampiric abilities, all of that. But honestly, the best part of the audio is the voiceover work. While by today's standards, it's not top tier, at the time it was, and it actually holds up surprisingly well. I mean, it's not flawless, but it is still well done. Then we'll move on to the gameplay mechanics and whatnot, and it's more or less a top-down / isometric hack and slash game. It is not an RPG, it is in fact hack / action adventure. You collect items to use, you collect abilities, but you don't actually level up. You find items that will enhance your life, your magic, give you new spells, you'll gain new armor, you'll gain new weapons, etc. But you're not leveling up in a traditional RPG XP sense. But I think what they did with all of that and mixing it into the game is awesome. For example, the mace is great if you want to beat on an enemy and stun them so that you can drain them of blood. But if you just need to slaughter some enemies, some undead skeletons, etc. that you can't drink blood from, a sword works better. But on top of that, you have a wolf form, you have your vampire form, you have different spells, some that can blast, some that are defensive spells. But then the cool thing is that they take those things and use them to solve puzzles, avoid traps, and all sorts of things like that. Maybe you have to blast a panel on a wall to unlock a door. You need to use your wolf form to jump up some ledges and things like that. There was an area that was basically entirely built around using your protective spell to get out of. I just think they did a good job blending all of those elements together. This game even allows you to cheese your way through in some ways because you can always return to your original crypt and get some health and magic out of that, which can come in handy because some of the zones, there aren't human enemies. There aren't enemies that you can necessarily drain blood from. So to keep yourself alive, you kind of got to cheese it a little bit, or at least I found that I needed to. Also, the bat form is really cool because while you can't use it in, most gameplay, it's a fast travel. So having a fast travel in a PS1 game is always appreciated. This is an open world game, more or less, as much as an open world game can be on a PS1 game, but it does work very well. Now, if I'm going to bitch about gameplay things, you have to manually save, and there are a shit ton of loading screens. Every house you go into, loading screen, and it takes considerably longer than you'd think. Anytime you leave a house, loading screen, it takes considerably longer than you'd think. In a tower and you're climbing to a new floor, loading screen, and it takes considerably longer than you'd think. I mean, I got used to it eventually, but it is something that does kind of drag down the experience in modern times. Okay, coming back to that, I looked into it a little bit. Apparently, it was something people complained about even back when. But let's move on to the controls, and they're a little janky. This was definitely of the time when you got a booklet, and the booklet explained the controls, which would be really beneficial in this situation. I mean, I didn't go looking for one. Maybe I should have, but I did figure out the controls, and I think they work well enough. It is weird because there are times where it feels like they're not necessarily responsive. I'll open the little menu for selecting an item or my spell, and I'll try to move it around, and it won't move around right away, and I'll have to you know, click around on the D-pad a few times or with the stick a few times for it to actually decide to do something. Or in wolf form, there are times where I'm trying to do the jump because that jump is the only way to jump, really, but it doesn't always work, which is really weird and frustrating. When you're walking around and you're fighting, you know, it works fine. And because when you're trying to select a spell or an item, it pauses the game, so that's okay. It's still just kind of annoying that you open that menu and it doesn't just automatically work. As for moving and slashing, I found that always worked fine. Draining blood always worked fine, but there are just some other small things that didn't work as well as I would like. And then last but not least, the graphics and visuals, and I mean, you could probably guess what I'm gonna say next, but it looks bad. It looks really bad. I mean, really bad. This is a very old game, so that is to be expected. The cinematics do not look good. I mean, they just straight up do not hold up. They don't even look good, honestly, by PS1 standards, in my opinion, because you had some games that looked phenomenal on the PS1, and this is not among them. It does, though, have that kind of classic PS1 pixelated, but you can very well make out your character's kind of color scheme and style. And there are actually plenty of colors. It's a surprisingly colorful game, and they do a good job with like the day-night cycle in the game, and it does actually impact the gameplay a little bit. I'm not going to go too in-depth with it because I really didn't feel like it impacted the gameplay a ton. But I do think it's cool that they implemented a day-night cycle. It does really look lighter, darker, based on day or night. Admittedly, sometimes at night it can be a little too dark, but you have a spell for that. What I will say, though, is I did like the style of this game, this kind of medieval vampire epic, I guess you'd call it. But what I do think is really good looking in this game is just the overall design, the armor, the weapons. Kain himself looks cool. I like the full body armor. I think games that don't do full body armor, I think it can be a little silly in some situations. It can work in others, but I like the full body armor that Kain wears. I like the world itself. I like the design of the enemies. I know not all of them look fantastic, but some of them look as cool as they can look with what you are seeing. I think the design of the areas, just everything they're telling from a visual standpoint, the story, what's going on in the world, all of that is very well done. It's very well put together. The effort was clearly put into it, which is always really impressive. Yes, there were clear limitations at the time, but they took full advantage of what they had to visually put together a great story and really reinforce the story that's going on. So to get into the wrap up, really, I just enjoyed the game. It was nice going back to a game that I had played many, many years ago and to be able to enjoy it once again. Sometimes games don't hold up, but I feel like this one actually managed to hold up quite well. I mean, yes, it obviously feels dated in every sense that it can, but I still found enjoyment there. Okay, in the comments down below, why don't you tell me who's your favorite vampire? And as always, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please hit that like button. And if you like what I'm doing in general, share and subscribe. Have a good one.